So today we are bringing in all of our hay, well, almost all of the hay, the majority of our hay for our cattle for the winter months. So at the time of this recording, it is mid-July, which is haying time in our neck of the woods in the Pacific Northwest. So we have got the first load undone and we've got two more coming. So my husband is on his way back to the hay fields and then he'll be coming and we'll be unloading them. And as you can see, we do the large white marshmallow bales. They look like giant white marshmallows. What they actually are, though, is they are haylage. So it's a cross between hay and silage, and it's a fermented type of hay. So fermented hay, just like fermented food for you and I, is really good for our health and the gut. And it does great things when it comes to hay because it actually increases the protein content. So that is really good. We get higher protein out of the hay, and they get more health and nutrition benefits when it's going to feed the cattle. So it just takes the hay and puts it into a higher nutrition state, which is beneficial to the cattle. Now, if you have horses, usually people do not feed haylage or silage to horses because, of course, horses can colic and they don't have the two stomachs that your cattle will have. So this is the primary way that we do our hay here on the homestead. And part of the reason for that is we do not have a barn. So if we're storing regular square bales, one, it takes a lot more moving wise because you are touching and moving that stuff a lot more than you are one big bale like this. And two, it has to be kept dry. You cannot get regular hay wet or store it out in the open. It's going to mold, it's going to mildew, and it's just going to turn gross. So this has worked really well for us because we do not have a barn and we just have a small hay storage area if we do get some square bales, which sometimes we'll grab some square bales here and there. But this is the primary way that we feed our cattle. The other great thing about this is you feed one of these bales, and depending upon the size of your herd, of course, we have 6 cows, you don't have to feed every day. So it's enough that you can put it out and they will eat on that for a few days, and then you don't have to worry about storing. So we can actually just store these out in the open. We're not worried about them. A couple of things, though, that we do have to be careful of. And the reason you don't see us actually unloading these bales using our tractor is because when we use the tractor, it can rip the plastic. And if you rip the plastic, then that bale is going to quickly turn. And so if you see any rips in the plastic, duct tape is a handy dandy thing, and we will duct tape and seal that back up until, of course, time of feeding. So that's why we can't really use equipment, or at least our tractor with a chain, because it rips them. Now, we do get to use the tractor when it comes to feeding time, hallelujah, because we're going to be taking the plastic off anyways. But these bales, that's why we're not using anything to unload them, because you really don't want to puncture that plastic wrapping on them. Patch job number 1. We did pretty lucky. With this load, we only had to patch 1 bale. All the rest were totally sealed up. The second load done and off of the truck, and these bales weigh approximately about 1,200 pounds a piece. So with 2 people, obviously my husband and I, and as long as you've got them rolling where they're actually, down on their sides, so you can roll them this way, you can move them by hand. But in order to pick them up, we're going to be using the tractor when we go ahead and we feed them this winter. Hey guys, and welcome to the livestock tour here on our homestead. And I'm so glad that you could join me. So we have 14.96 acres here on our homestead. And we have about almost 2 acres, which is where we have our yard and the house and all of our annual vegetable garden, the fruit trees and bushes and the perennial plants, our living space, obviously our house, the woodshed, which is what I'm standing in front of, and all of that. So then it's the rest of the pasture land, the other 13 acres, is what we have dedicated and where we have our livestock at. So we use organic grass-fed practices with all of our animals as much as possible. So we raise organic grass-fed beef just for our own consumption. And so they are on pasture land. And luckily here, as long as the weather is cooperating, we have pasture and grass growing so that we're not having to feed any of the hay, usually April through about October. Now, if you have a really dry summer, last summer was super dry and we actually had to start feeding in August, which made us go through a lot more hay and it's not ideal. And if you have a really long, cold winter, sometimes we have to feed into May. But most of the time we'll stop feeding sometime in April and then we start feeding again in October. So I'm going to take you out into our top pasture and show you around. And the top pasture is where we keep the chickens and the cattle. So the cattle we rotate amongst some different pastures. So I'm going to show you that part. So this is our top pasture, and this is where we keep the cattle most of the time, and it's where we keep our laying hens. So we've got a movable chicken coop that we use in the summertime with a chicken tractor, so I can actually move them all over the pasture, which I will show you in depth how we use our chicken tractor to help with our pasture management in next week's video. So make sure that you're subscribed so that you get those notifications when our new videos come out every Wednesday, and we'll walk into depth on that. But we do keep our chickens, so my laying hens, I should specify, those we keep in a chicken tractor. I've tried free ranging, but we have a lot of coyotes. We've got bobcats. Occasionally we have cougar, we have bear. And I've just found that one weekend we had 18 chickens and we went camping and they were able to go into the coop at night and then they were free ranging during the day. And unfortunately, in just 2 days' time, I came home and I had one chicken left. So we have learned, and even when I've been home, the chickens were free ranging. I was actually out in the yard hanging laundry up, and there was a coyote just like 10 feet away from the chickens that were out just free ranging in this top pasture and in our backyard. So we have learned that keeping our chickens in a chicken tractor is the only way that we can actually keep our chickens and protect them because we have so many predators. We also have a lot of bald eagles, and those will snatch up and get your chickens as well. So that's why we like to use the movable chicken tractor, just because they get to be on fresh pasture, they get all the benefits of that, but they also have the protection. So in this top field, we have got the chicken coop where we have the laying hens and I move them around. And then this is our pump house. And so this is where obviously we have our pump. We have one of our big chest freezers in this pump house where we preserve a lot of our meat, because when you are raising your own grass-fed beef, and then we also do organic grass-fed pork, and then we do meat chickens. Now I don't actually have any meat chickens to show you right now, but I will show you some footage of them when we did have the meat chickens. The reason I don't have any meat chickens to show you right now is, one, we try to get them earlier in the spring so that they are butchered before the heat of summer really comes on, so that they're done for the year. But the second reason is we had still quite a few whole meat chickens from when we butchered last year in the freezer. And I want to make sure that we're always going through and that we're using the things that we put up. So because we had so many whole chickens left, it just didn't actually make sense for us to raise any this year. So we took a year off. Next year we'll bring back and do the meat chickens again. But we took a year off this year. And we will use them in the chicken tractor. And then I also have a little holding coop on the back side here of our pump house that we will keep the meat chickens in. So this is obviously not a movable coop, but you can keep quite a few chickens in here. And then we use this one a lot of times too in the winter when we're not able to move the chicken tractor around. And you can see it kind of needs a little bit of cleaning up, but here is this area. So here is our herd. Now, as far as breeds, we have kind of got some mixed breeds going on. So we have got our brown Hereford. So she's the brown one with the white face. So we've got our Hereford. We've also got some black Angus. We've got some mixes too, where we've got some black Angus with the Hereford. Then we also have one that is just straight black Angus. We don't actually keep a bull. So we've got some different cows in various stages. So we have got a couple of yearlings, And then we have got our cows that we actually will be breeding back. And then we have a couple of heifers that we're not sure if we're going to sell or if we're going to keep them for breeding stock, or if maybe we'll butcher one. Unfortunately, the past couple of years with our calves, we've gotten all heifers. So a heifer is an unbred female cow, if you weren't sure. And we really like to get bulls, which we then turn into steers, because you're going to get a lot more meat on them. They grow faster, and ideally you don't want to be butchering your female cows because you can breed them back or you can sell them as breeder cows. But that's all we've been getting, and we don't actually keep a bull. So we're lucky enough where we live that my brother, our neighbors, and my dad all keep bulls. They have larger herds than ours, and so we're able to bring in their bulls or take our cows to their bull. It kind of just depends on each person and the time of year. And we can kind of rotate through their bulls and use them to breed ours without having a bull. And the reason that can be advantageous is, one, we have a pretty small herd, so we really don't need to keep a bull year round. Bulls are going to eat a lot more food, and so you're looking at a lot bigger feed expense. And then also when you have a bull, especially if you've got neighboring herds and any of their cows come into heat, bulls really don't care that much about fences, and so they will go through a fence to get to cows in heat. If you can use someone else's bull and not keep your own, is really a really great way to go as far as monetarily wise, and not keeping a bull on your pasture and just having that year-round expense. It also works really well too, because our neighbors and other people that we've been able to use their bull for breeding purposes, is they love not having to feed that bull for a couple of months. So you'll want to track your cattle's heat cycle. So you want to make sure you know when your cows are coming into heat and that the bull is there for that. And usually you'll keep them for 2 heat cycles with the bull, just in case things didn't take that first heat cycle. So it just kind of ensures it. So usually when we have our cows with the bull, either the bull here or we take our cows to their pasture, which ideally we'll bring the bull here, because then our cows aren't eating their pasture and they're letting us use their bull. Now, some people, you can work out where they may charge you to use their bull. And of course you'll just work out those individual deals, but it's worked really well for us. But usually it's 2 months that you're going to want to have those cows with the bull, just to make sure that they take. So this is one of the best watering troughs that we have ever had. So this is it's a really old cast iron bathtub. It was actually just here when we purchased the property, and it's great because we've got it fairly close to the pump house. You definitely want to make sure that you've always got fresh water for your livestock. And so we use this bathtub year-round as the main water source. Now, when it comes to rotating the cattle through the pastures, where you actually just saw them was actually my aunt's property. And so we have a deal worked out with her, which is great. And so during the summer months only, it's an additional small field worth of pasture that we can put and rotate the cows over on. And we actually will leave all of the different gates open so that they can come back over on this side to get water and go through the different pastures. But then as we get closer to winter, and when the grass and the pasture starts to go more dormant, we'll let some grow up a little bit more and close it off and keep them on one area. And then when the winter months come, we end up closing off the back pastures. Most of them have quite a bit of forest on them. There's not a ton of grass anyways. And we keep them up closer because this is where we're feeding. And during the winter months, there's usually a little bit more predators, and so the cattle are safer when they're up closer to home. But how much pasture land or how much acreage do you need per cow in order to not feed year round? So of course it's going to vary on your climate, but here where we live, which is in the Pacific Northwest on the west side of the mountains, so we get a good amount of rainfall most of the time. Usually you're going to figure about 2 acres, an acre to 2 acres per animal of actual cleared grass pasture in order to not have to feed them year round. So with your fencing, especially with cattle, we have found barbed wire to just be the best. You want to make sure that you have good fencing. If you have cows, you'll also notice that we've got some of these metal stays in between here, because a cow is kind of like a mouse. If they can get their head through the fence, they will get the rest of their body through the fence. And they're actually fairly agile. I have seen a cow from just a standing position, so not like running, literally hop and clear a shorter, like a 3-foot fence. So if you're really determined to keep them in an area, you want to make sure that you're going high enough up. That's why we have another strand of barbed wire here. And especially if you think they're going to be reaching through, which they usually will, they always think the grass is greener on the other side of the fence, even if it's not. Having something like this where we will put these metal stays down and throughout, so that if they get their head between there, they can't push the wire anymore, and that stops them from going through the fence. We've been pretty lucky. Our cows don't get out very often, but here where we live, if your cows do get out, you are responsible for any damage that they do. So if they were to get out on the road and a car were to hit them, as the owner of the cow, we would be responsible. When they get out, they tend to get a little bit spooked, and they'll run through people's gardens and just kind of be a general nuisance. So if you can keep them in, that's ideal. Now, we don't actually use hot wire. To use hot wire on over 12 acres worth of pasture is going to be a lot. And here, when you've got vegetation growing up, you're going to have to go through quite often to make sure that none of it's growing up and hitting it and it's shorting it out. Then you've got the added expense of actually running electricity or using some type of solar device to run it to keep that electric fence going. And so we don't use the hot wire for our regular pasture fences. We just go ahead and use the barbed wire. But you do see up, and this is not on, you do see up above here, I do run some hot wire, and we do use the hot wire when it comes to our pigs and the pig pen, because just using barbed wire or even hog wire panel is not going to keep pigs in. We've learned that the hard way. So we always use hot wire when it comes to the pigs. And so we run it up high until we actually get out to where the pig pens are at, because of that vegetation thing. I don't have to worry about the grass growing up, or weeds, usually more so than the grass, and shorting it out when it's up here. So this is down our pasture. This actually, like hundreds of years ago, the old riverbed used to go through here, and so you can definitely tell where the river actually was and then where the banks are. So we've got some different elevation drops, but this is actually in the pasture that's fairly close to the house, and then we drop down. And this is where we generally will keep the pigs. And you're going to notice an absence of pigs right now. This is actually one of their pens. You always want to make sure that you've got some type of structure for them, a house to get in. We've got quite a bit of straw in there so they can get out of the weather and keep warm if they need be, or for shade, depending on the time of the year. But we don't actually have any of the fences up right now. We're just letting the cows be in on this area for pasture. And the reason for that is the same thing as with the meat chickens. We actually have quite a bit of meat. I have ham and sausage and all those things left in the freezer, some ribs. And we had so much of it left that it didn't make sense to raise another pig and butcher it this year with all of the abundance of meat that we do have. So we took a year off from raising the pigs and the meat chickens this year, which sometimes, I have to confess, I love the homestead life and being able to provide 100% of the meat that my family eats. We either harvest and catch, like when we go crabbing, which you can watch that video. We take our ski boat out and get a year's worth of crab for our family just here locally on the bay. And I have a video, I'll put it in the description below, so you can go and check that out if you want. And we get salmon, and then of course we raise our beef. And normally we raise our own meat chickens and our own pork. But we had so much of all the meat that we really didn't need to do it. So we took a year off. So it's been kind of nice because we've been able to focus the funds and the feeding of them and just that outright work into some other areas and do some other things on the homestead. So that's been really great. But I will show you some footage of the pigs. And what we've raised in the past has been Hereford pigs. So it's a heritage breed of pigs. And we actually get them from a local breeder. We get them in the spring and then we butcher in the fall. So that's not a breeding program that we have set up. It just is a lot better for us. We're only doing it for our own consumption. Just raise a couple of pigs and not have to winter them over or deal with the breeder setup. Another great thing about having the pigs though is they can clear your land for you really good. So we've got a lot of briars and some thistles here. So blackberries, they're actually classified as a noxious weed here where we live because they're so invasive and they will take over the pasture land. And we've tried goats, and we've actually found the pigs to be a lot more efficient at eradicating weeds, especially blackberry vines and that type of thing, than the goats were. So the pigs will actually root down and get down to the root, and they'll help to till up the soil naturally, and they're a lot better at just keeping the brush back and clearing land than we have found goats to be. So we like to do that, and so we usually end up rotating the pigs in areas where we need them to clear things back. And so that's where we had them here. This was a ton of brush and blackberry vines. And so you can see now this is quite a bit of pasture, a little bit of weeds in there, but not too bad. And so they cleared this area out for us when we had them here last year. So one of the things when you're considering where you're going to put your livestock, especially if it's something, a pen that's going to require hot wire and or water, if you can put it close to a source. So we actually have power to our pump house, which is just right above me there. So we can run the hot wire and have the fencer on there really easily, as well as get water to the pigs when they're in an enclosed pen area. So if you're thinking about getting animals, that's always a great thing to take into consideration, how close you are to the water, and if you need any electricity source, that you're going to be able to run that out to them as well. So if you enjoyed this video and tour of our homestead, let me know in the comments below, especially if you have any questions that I didn't go over, or you'd like to see more in-depth information about the ways that we rotate and use our pasture land and raise our livestock and all of our own meat. I would love to know, and make sure that you are subscribed so that you get that notification every Wednesday when we put out a new video. Thank you guys so much.